The Maron Dominion ships appeared in Earth's orbit without warning. Their massive vessels darkened the skies over major cities, casting shadows that stretched for miles. People looked up in fear and wonder at the alien crafts, their smooth metallic surfaces reflecting sunlight in ways that made them seem almost alive. Admiral Tejo stood on the bridge of his command ship, looking down at the blue planet with mild interest. Standing nearly 8 feet tall with scaled skin that shifted colors with his moods, he cut an impressive figure even among his own kind. His current copper-green coloration reflected his feeling of smug superiority. "Primitive," he said, gesturing at the planet's visible infrastructure. "They still use combustion engines and silicon-based computing. Their orbital stations are barely more than habitation modules." His second-in-command, Captain Junho, nodded in agreement. "Their most advanced weapons could not penetrate even our transport ship shields. The conquest will be simple." Tahoe's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. "Perhaps not conquest, at least not yet. The High Council prefers resource extraction with minimal resistance. Let us offer them protection status first." The Maron had perfected this approach across 200 star systems. Arrive with overwhelming force, offer protection in exchange for resources and obedience, then slowly absorb the planet's uniqueness into their empire. Those who refused faced orbital bombardment until they changed their minds. 3 days later, inside the United Nations building in New York, human representatives from Earth's nations gathered. The room buzzed with nervous energy as delegates whispered among themselves. Some argued for immediate surrender, others for resistance, but all fell silent when the doors swung open. Admiral Tejo entered with 4 guards, each Maron warrior carrying energy weapons that hummed with barely contained power. Many humans gasped. They had seen images of the aliens, but the reality of their towering presence was far more intimidating. The Admiral's scales now displayed a confident purple sheen as he approached the central podium. "People of Earth," his voice boomed through the translator device at his throat. "The Maron Dominion offers you an opportunity few receive. Your world possesses resources we value. Your species shows potential, despite your technological limitations. We offer protection and guidance in exchange for reasonable resource extraction rights and recognition of Maron authority in this system." A woman from the human delegation stood. Dr. Kim Nari, Earth's chief negotiator, was barely half Tahoe's height, but showed no fear as she looked up at him. "We thank the Maron Dominion for this offer," she said calmly. "But Earth would like to propose a mutual cooperation agreement instead." Tahoe's scales flickered briefly to surprised yellow before settling into amused orange. "You misunderstand. This is not a negotiation between equals. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your military capabilities are insignificant. We could take what we want." Dr. Kim nodded politely. "And yet you're here talking. This suggests you prefer cooperation over conflict." "So do we." Behind her, an aide wheeled forward a cart containing a single document printed on actual paper, a rarity in this digital age, but the humans had correctly guessed the ceremonial value would appeal to the Maron. "This is our proposed treaty," Dr. Kim explained. "Most terms are standard diplomatic agreements. Trade, cultural exchange, territorial recognition. We've studied records of other Maron protectorates and believe these terms are fair." Tahoe took the document, his long fingers careful with the unfamiliar paper material. As he read, his scales remained a steady orange until he reached Article 7. The color drained to a pale blue of confusion. Article 7 states, "Harm inflicted upon human children by any member species of the Dominion will result in immediate and irreversible severance of relations, followed by appropriate response measures." "This is unusual." Dr. Kim's expression remained neutral. "Children are sacred to our species, Admiral. This is non-negotiable." Captain Junho leaned toward Tahoe, speaking in their native language. "They place unusual value on their young. Many primitive species do, biological instinct. The clause is meaningless since they lack enforcement capability." Tahoe's scales slowly returned to confident purple. These humans were interesting, showing spirit despite their obvious disadvantage. He respected that, even found it amusing. The document otherwise gave the Marin everything they wanted: mining rights to Mars and the asteroid belt, access to Earth's water and organic compounds, and nominal oversight of human space travel. One strange clause about protecting children seemed a small concession to smooth the process. What harm could come from humoring them? After all, the Marin weren't in the habit of targeting children. They were conquerors, not monsters. "Very well," Tahoe said, his translator conveying his words to the assembled humans. "The Marin Dominion accepts these terms, including your Article 7. Relief washed across many human faces, though Dr. Kim maintained her professional composure. "Excellent. We look forward to a productive relationship." As they completed the signing ceremony, Tahoe couldn't help but notice the strange intensity in the human's eyes. It wasn't fear. He was familiar with that look from 100 conquered worlds. No, this seemed almost like patience. Later, back on his ship, Tahoe reviewed the meeting with his command staff. "They surrendered too easily," said Weapons Officer Jihoon. "I expected more resistance from a species that has never encountered alien life." "They're pragmatic," Tahoe replied. "They recognized their position and made the best of it. I find it refreshing compared to the usual denial and posturing." "What about this Article 7? Asked Captain Junno. "Such specific protection for their young seems odd." Tahoe waved a dismissive hand, his scales now a relaxed green. "Cultural peculiarity. Many species have them. The Bilari worship water sources. The Tross never eat in front of others. Humans apparently have some special attachment to their offspring. It costs us nothing to respect it. And if some incident does occur," Junno pressed. Tahoe laughed, a rumbling sound that made the scales on his neck vibrate. What could they possibly do? Their most advanced weapons can barely reach their own moon. Their ships would be destroyed before they left orbit. Let them have their article. It gives them the illusion of control. As the Marin ships established permanent positions around Earth, and mining operations began on Mars, Admiral Teo filed his report to the High Council. He noted the humans' unusual emphasis on child protection, but classified it as a harmless cultural quirk, not worth further attention. The Marin Dominion had successfully added Earth to its growing empire, system number 201. Another success with minimal resistance. Tahoe was pleased. These humans would make useful subjects, and in time, they would forget they had ever been independent. What neither Tahoe nor any other Marin realized was that the human delegation had left the meeting with equal satisfaction. As they dispersed to inform their governments, Dr. Kim made a single call. "They signed," she said simply. "Article 7 is in place." On the other end, a voice replied, "Good. Let's hope they never test it." The red dust of Mars swirled around the massive mining complex as Commander Daehyun paced in his control room. His scales had turned a deep, anxious yellow, reflecting his mounting stress. 3 production cycles had passed since their equipment began failing, and his superiors demanded results. "The primary extractor has completely collapsed," reported his engineer, Minju. "The shaft integrity is compromised. We cannot safely continue operations without major repairs." Daehyun slammed his fist into the metal wall, leaving a dent. "The High Command expects our quarterly shipment in 14 days. I will not be the first Marin commander to miss production quotas on this worthless red rock." He moved to the viewing port, looking out at the barren Martian landscape. In the distance, he could see the small human colony that supported the mining operation. The humans there were cooperative enough. They maintained equipment, handled toxic materials Marin physiology couldn't tolerate, and served as general labor. But they were too few to help with his current crisis. "What options do we have?" he asked. His logistics officer, Cook, brought up a display showing nearby space traffic. "There's a human transport vessel scheduled to pass within our range tomorrow. The Odyssey, returning to Earth after delivering supplies to the outer colonies. It has the equipment we need in its cargo hold. Perfect. We'll commandeer it temporarily. Prepare a boarding team. Minju's scales flickered with concern. Commander, requisitioning human vessels without prior approval violates Section 12 of the treaty. Dahyun waved away the concern. I'll file the emergency authorization paperwork afterward. The humans understand that sometimes urgent matters require immediate action. Besides, we'll compensate them for the delay. The next day, the Odyssey approached Mars on its return journey to Earth. Captain Elena Rodriguez was in the middle of her shift when the ship's sensors detected approaching vessels. Maron signatures, Captain, reported her navigation officer. 3 interceptors on approach vector. They're hailing us. Rodriguez frowned. This was unusual. The Marin generally ignored human ships unless they violated some restriction. Put them through. The screen flickered to life, showing Commander Dahyun's yellow-scaled face. Human vessel Odyssey. This is Commander Dahyun of Mars Mining Operation 6. Your ship is being temporarily requisitioned for emergency resource extraction. Prepare to be boarded. Rodriguez kept her expression neutral despite her alarm. Commander, we're carrying 300 passengers returning to Earth, including 42 children. We're not equipped for mining operations. Dahyun's scales darkened. We need your equipment and some of your crew for emergency repairs. It will delay your journey by no more than 3 days. Comply immediately or face consequences. Rodriguez knew arguing was pointless. The Maron interceptors could disable her ship with a single shot. We'll prepare for your boarding party. When the Maron troops entered the Odyssey, they immediately began seizing equipment and ordering crew members to prepare for transfer to the mining facility. The passengers were directed to remain in their quarters during the operation. But humans, especially those protecting their children, don't always follow orders. A group of parents, worried about being separated from the main ship, barricaded themselves and their children in the recreation area. When Dahyun received word of this resistance, his scales flashed angry red. "Bring me to these defiant humans," he ordered. Aboard the Odyssey, he found 30 humans blocking access to the recreation area. They had makeshift weapons, tools, and sports equipment, but looked terrified facing the armored Maron soldiers. "This resistance is unacceptable," Dahyun announced. "Your ship has been legally requisitioned under emergency protocols. Step aside." A man stepped forward, his hands shaking but voice steady. "Our children are scared. We won't let you separate families. Just take what you need and leave us alone." Dahyun had dealt with human stubbornness before. Sometimes a display of force was necessary to maintain control. He nodded to his security chief. "Make an example," he ordered. What happened next occurred in horrible slow motion. The Maron soldiers fired what they intended as warning shots, energy weapons set to stun, but in the confined space of the ship corridor, the blasts ricocheted. Panicked humans rushed the soldiers, who responded with increased force. Within moments, the situation spiraled beyond control. When it ended, 17 humans lay wounded or dead. 7 of them were children who had emerged from hiding during the chaos. Dahyun stood in shock, his scales drained to ashen gray. This was not what he had intended, but he was a military commander, and hesitation would show weakness. "Secure the ship," he ordered, his voice flat. "Continue with the equipment transfer. The wounded will receive medical attention." He stepped over the body of a small human child, perhaps 6 years old, her eyes still open in final surprise. A regrettable incident, but ultimately just collateral damage. The mining operation would continue. 3 days later, as the Odyssey was finally released to resume its journey to Earth, Dahyun filed his report. He classified the incident as minor resistance resulting in necessary force application and listed the human casualties as an unfortunate accident. The High Command, busy with matters across 200 systems, filed the report without comment. Humans occasionally resisted Maron authority, but they always learned their place. This incident would be forgotten like all the others. When the Odyssey reached Earth orbit, the recording of what had happened spread immediately. The 7 dead children became the focus of global attention. Their names and faces appeared on every screen worldwide. Streets filled with silent mourners holding their images. In the United Nations emergency session, the human representatives were unusually calm. There were no shouted demands for justice, no dramatic speeches, just quiet, methodical discussion. They voted unanimously on a single action. Admiral Tejo was in his office on the Meron flagship when the message arrived from Earth. It was brief, just 3 words: "You were warned." He remembered Article 7 of the treaty and felt a momentary unease, but quickly dismissed it. His scales settled into confident purple again. What could the humans possibly do? Their outrage would pass. Perhaps they would demand the removal of Commander Didion, or request additional mining rights as compensation. Standard diplomatic maneuvering that the Dominion had handled countless times before. Send a standard response expressing regret for the incident. He instructed his communications officer. Inform them we will review the commander's actions and consider appropriate disciplinary measures. But when they attempted to transmit the message, they received no acknowledgement. Further attempts to contact Earth went unanswered. Within hours, all human ships throughout the solar system changed course without explanation. Mining operations on Mars reported that human workers had abandoned their posts without warning. Communication satellites orbiting Earth went silent one by one. What are they doing? Tahoe wondered aloud, his scales now showing concerned blue patterns. Throwing a tantrum, said Captain Junho dismissively. Like children themselves, they'll realize their dependence on us soon enough. Tahoe nodded slowly, but as he looked at the silent blue planet below, he couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. The humans had been too accepting of Meron authority these past 3 years. Too cooperative, almost as if they had been waiting for something. Increase security on all Meron facilities, he ordered suddenly. And get me Commander Dahian. I want him transferred up here immediately. But by then, Dahian had stopped responding to communications as well. And across the galaxy, human colonies and outposts had gone completely dark. Supreme General Hyunwoo stood before the Emergency Council, his scales a pale gray of deep concern. The massive crystal dome of the High Command Chamber on the Meron homeworld normally inspired confidence, but today it felt exposed and vulnerable. The 12 empty seats around the table represented the colonial governors who had simply vanished along with their entire populations. Play the footage again, he ordered. The holographic display in the center of the table flickered to life. The security recording from Colony Sirius 4 showed an ordinary day in the central plaza. Meron citizens moved about their business, shopping, talking, working. Then something strange happened. A small group of humans walked calmly into view. They wore no armor, carried no visible weapons, just simple gray uniforms with no insignia. The Meron in the plaza initially paid them little attention. Humans were rare on Sirius 4, but not unknown. Trading delegations occasionally visited. But then one human approached a Meron citizen, reached out, and simply touched her shoulder. The Meron female shuddered once, her scales flashing bright white for a split second. And then, she was gone. No sound, no flash, no disintegration effect. One moment she existed, the next she didn't. The recording showed the humans methodically moving through the plaza, touching Meron after Meron, each disappearing in the same manner. There was no panic at first. The disappearances happened so quickly that others didn't notice. By the time the remaining Meron realized something was wrong, half the plaza was empty. Then the real horror began. Meron security forces arrived, weapons drawn. They fired energy blasts at the humans, but the beams passed through them as if they weren't there. The humans never ran or took cover. They simply continued their calm, methodical progress, reaching out to touch each Meron they encountered. The security forces vanished just like the civilians. The recording ended with an empty plaza, buildings intact, water features still flowing, but completely devoid of Meron life. Only the humans remained, walking calmly toward the next sector. This same pattern repeats across all 12 colonies, General Hyunwoo said, his voice tight. No destruction, no violence, no bodies, just removal. Defense Minister Jinwoo slammed his fist on the table. This is impossible. Humans don't have this technology. They were centuries behind us. Science Director Yoonjae spoke quietly. Apparently, they do have this technology. And they've had it all along. A biological weapon, suggested another council member. Yoonjae shook her head. No biological agent works this way. This is something else. Something that defies our understanding of physics. Whatever it is, said General Hyunwoo, it's spreading. We've lost contact with 3 more colonies since this meeting began. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. 12 colonies, millions of Meron citizens, gone without a trace. Not killed in battle, not even bodies to recover in honor. Simply erased from existence. What do the humans want? Asked Minister Jinwoo, his scales now faded to a sickly yellow. Have they made demands? None, replied the communications director. They've sent no messages since their warning. You were warned. They're not interested in negotiation. General Hyunwoo brought up a galactic map. 15 red dots now showed colonies that had gone silent. They're being strategic. These aren't random attacks. They're systematically isolating our major fleet bases. On the far side of Meron territory, Admiral Sora commanded the defense of Rigel Station, the Dominion's largest military outpost. She had received the emergency alert about the colony disappearances, but considered her position secure. Rigel Station had been built into an asteroid, with defenses that could repel an armada. Increase sensor suites, she ordered. No human ship will approach without detection. Her security chief nodded. All personnel are on high alert. We've sealed all access points and activated the shield grid. Admiral Sora looked at the tactical display with satisfaction. 6 destroyer-class ships patrolled the perimeter. The station's energy cannons could target any approach vector. Nothing could reach them without being seen. Which is why the report from Level 12 made no sense. Admiral, her communications officer said, scales flickering with confusion. Security teams on Level 12 report human intruders. Impossible. How could they board without triggering alarms? Unknown. Admiral, teams are investigating now. Sora grabbed her sidearm. Lock down all levels. I want those humans contained and captured. We need to understand their technology. But the reports coming in grew more disturbing by the minute. Level 12 had gone silent. Then Level 11. Then Level 10. Security feeds showed the same pattern. Small groups of humans moving calmly through corridors, touching Meron personnel who simply vanished on contact. Evacuate the station, Sora ordered, her scales now white with fear. All personnel to emergency transporters. But it was too late. The humans had reached the transportation hubs first. There was nowhere to run. When Sora saw them enter the command center, she fired her weapon directly at the lead human. The energy blast passed through him as if he were a hologram. He approached her calmly, his expression neither angry nor triumphant. Just focused. Why are you doing this? She demanded, backing away. We can negotiate. Whatever you want. You were warned, the human said, simply, reaching toward her. Admiral Sora's last thought before the strange cold touch reached her was that they had gravely underestimated these primitive beings. Then whiteness flashed across her vision, and she felt herself unraveling. Atom by atom, conscious, but no longer physically present. Back on the Meron homeworld, panic was spreading. The military broadcasted assurances that the situation was under control, but rumors spread faster than official statements. Ordinary citizens began fleeing major cities, though no one knew where safety might be found. In the High Command Chamber, General Hyunwoo received the news that Rigel Station had gone silent. His scales darkened to nearly black, the color of deepest dread. How is this possible? Demanded Minister Jinwoo. How are they reaching our worlds? Our sensors detect no human ships approaching. Science Director Yunje studied data from the fallen colonies. The humans must have developed some form of transportation we don't understand. They don't need ships as we know them. Could they have been among us all along? Asked another council member, looking around nervously as if humans might materialize in the chamber. Perhaps, said Yunje. For 3 years, we've allowed humans throughout our territory. Workers, traders, diplomats. We never considered them a threat. General Henwu made a decision. We must strike at Earth directly. If we destroy their homeworld, perhaps this attack will cease. But even as he gave the order, reports came in that the fleet bases nearest Earth had gone silent too. The ships meant to carry out the attack had vanished with all hands. They knew, whispered Unja. They've been planning this since the beginning. Since Article 7 of the treaty. The council members looked at each other, the same realization dawning in all their minds. The humans hadn't been primitive at all. They had been patient, waiting for the Marin to violate their one absolute condition. And now the response had begun. The grand warship Unyielding Thunder moved through space toward the human colony on Proxima Centauri B. General Minho stood on the command deck, his scales shifting between determined red and anxious yellow. Behind him loomed the Dominion's ultimate weapon, a planet-killer device capable of tearing a world apart at its molecular level. Weapon status, Minho demanded. Charged and ready, General, responded Weapons Officer Taeyong. Planet Killer will be in optimal firing range in 17 minutes. Minho nodded grimly. The Marin High Command had authorized the most extreme response possible. Simultaneous strikes against all known human settlements. 23 warships like this one were approaching human worlds across the galaxy. If humans could somehow remove Marin from existence, then the Marin would eliminate the planets humans called home. Any sign of human response? Minho asked his sensor officer. None, General. No ships detected, no defense systems activating on the planet. They appear unaware. This didn't comfort Minho. The humans had shown they didn't need ships or conventional weapons. Their strange removal technology operated by rules the Marin didn't understand. Maintain maximum alert. All personnel to wear full protective gear. If any human is detected aboard, eliminate immediately. Do not allow physical contact. The bridge crew worked tensely at their stations. Each wore sealed armor despite the discomfort. No one wanted to disappear like the millions of Marin who had already vanished. As they approached firing position, Minho allowed himself a moment of hope. Perhaps this would work. Perhaps destroying human worlds would force them to stop their attack and negotiate. The alternative, the complete removal of Marin civilization, was unthinkable. General, the communications officer called. We're receiving a transmission from the planet. On screen, Minho ordered. The main display showed a single human female sitting at a plain desk. She wore the same simple gray uniform seen in the colony footage. Marin vessel, she said calmly. This is Dr. Kim Neri of Earth Authority. Your mission will fail. Return to your space. Minho's scales flushed angry red. This was the same human who had negotiated the original treaty with Admiral Tao. You cannot stop this weapon, he responded. Your colony will be destroyed. End your attack on our people, and we may still find a path to peace. Dr. Kim's expression remained neutral. There is no path back. You violated Article 7. The response is automatic and irreversible. Your weapon will never fire. We shall see. Minho cut the transmission. Proceed with the attack. Officer Taeyong began the final arming sequence for the Planet Killer. The massive device hummed as energy built in its core. On the tactical display, the targeting system locked onto the human colony below. Firing in 30 seconds, Taeyong announced. The bridge crew watched the countdown with tense anticipation. This would be the first real strike back against the humans since their attack began. At 5 seconds remaining, Taeyong suddenly jerked in his seat. General, he gasped, his scales flashing white. There's someone. He vanished mid-sentence. Chaos erupted on the bridge. Where Taeyong had sat, a human now stood. A man in the same gray uniform, his hand extended where he had touched the weapons officer. "Security," Minho shouted, drawing his sidearm. But as guards rushed forward, more humans appeared throughout the bridge, stepping out from behind equipment, emerging from shadows where none should have been able to hide. Minho fired his weapon, but the energy blast passed harmlessly through his target. The human walked calmly toward him as bridge crew members vanished one by one around him. "How are you doing this?" Minho demanded, backing away. "How did you get aboard?" The human said nothing, just kept advancing. Minho noticed something odd about the human's movements. They seemed to flicker slightly, as if not fully present in normal space. "We've been here all along," said a voice behind him. Minho spun to find Dr. Kim herself standing on his bridge. Impossible. She had just been on the planet below. "Your science never explored phase shifting," she explained, as if lecturing a student. "Humans developed it centuries ago, but found it too dangerous to use widely. It allows us to exist slightly out of sync with normal spacetime. We've had operatives on every Meron ship and base since the treaty was signed." Minho's back hit the wall. There was nowhere left to retreat. The Child Protection Clause, he realized. It was a trap. "No," Dr. Kim corrected. "It was a warning. One you chose to ignore." She reached toward him, and General Minho joined the millions of Meron who had already been removed from existence. Across the galaxy, all 23 planet killer missions failed in exactly the same way. No weapon fired. No human world suffered any damage. The warships themselves remained intact, drifting in space, completely empty of life. On the Meron homeworld, the High Council huddled in their deepest bunker. Of the 200 Meron colonies and outposts, only 30 remained in contact. The rest had gone silent. The removal was happening faster now, as if the humans had fully committed their forces after the failed planet killer attack. Supreme General Hyunwoo studied the latest reports with growing despair. His scales had turned gray, the color of accepting death. "We found this," Science Director Yoonja said, placing a small data device on the table. "It contains human historical records. I think you should see them." The display showed Earth centuries before first contact, humans with primitive technology. But then it showed hidden facilities deep underground, where very different work was underway. Humans had discovered principles of reality manipulation long before they developed space travel. They had created the phase shift technology, allowing matter to exist out of sync with normal spacetime. They had developed the removal process, capable of extracting beings from reality without harming them. But most importantly, they had chosen not to use these technologies. Early experiments had gone wrong. Ethical debates had raged. In the end, humans had decided such power was too dangerous for everyday use. They had sealed the knowledge away, continuing their development along safer paths. "They weren't primitive at all," Minister Jinwoo whispered. "They were careful. Until we gave them reason not to be," Yoonja finished. The bunker's alert system suddenly blared. Security feeds showed humans appearing throughout the government complex above them. Not arriving, simply phasing into visibility from where they had been all along waiting. "How long do we have?" asked Jinwoo. "Minutes," replied Hyunwoo. "Perhaps less." Yoonja studied the human historical records one last time. "It says here they don't actually destroy the beings they remove. They transfer consciousness to some kind of storage dimension. We won't die. We'll just continue elsewhere." The bunker door slid open. A group of humans in gray uniforms stood calmly in the entrance. "Is there no way to stop this?" Hanmu asked them. "No apology or reparation we can offer." The lead human shook his head. "You were warned. The response is automatic once triggered. Every Meron will be removed. Your worlds will remain. Your buildings will stand, but your species will exist elsewhere." "And the children who died?" asked Yoonja. "They cannot be brought back." the human said. That is why the penalty is absolute. One by one, the remaining Meron leaders were touched and vanished. Across the homeworld, the pattern repeated in every city, every home, every hiding place. By sunset, the once mighty center of the Meron dominion was silent, its buildings empty, its technology abandoned. The unstoppable wave had reached its source. The removal was nearly complete. The space station Harmony hung in orbit above the Meron homeworld, its observation deck offering a perfect view of the blue-green planet below. From this distance, the world looked peaceful and untouched. The sprawling cities gleamed in the sunlight. Vehicles still sat in streets. Buildings stood intact. Gardens remained perfectly tended. But not a single Meron walked those streets. Not one lived in those buildings. Not one tended those gardens. Inside the observation deck, representatives from 20 different galactic species gathered nervously. Some had traveled for weeks to attend this unprecedented meeting. Many had been part of the Meron Dominion or had feared it. Others had been neutral trading partners. All had received the same simple invitation from Earth: attend and witness. The Volari ambassador, a tall insectoid being, clicked her mandibles anxiously. They removed an entire species. 200 worlds, emptied in 5 weeks. Not just removed, relocated, corrected the Zentavi diplomat, his eye stalks swiveling toward the planet. The humans insist the Meron still exist, somewhere else. A hush fell over the gathering as the doors slid open. Dr. Kim Neri entered, flanked by 2 humans in simple black diplomatic uniforms. She carried no weapons, or no ornate clothing or jewelry that might indicate rank. Nothing about her physical appearance suggested she represented the most feared power in the galaxy. She walked to the center of the room and waited until all attention focused on her. When she spoke, her voice was calm and measured. Thank you for coming. I am Dr. Kim Neri, Earth Authority Diplomatic Corps. 5 weeks ago, a Meron commander named Daeyan killed 7 human children during an illegal seizure of a civilian transport. As stipulated in Article 7 of our treaty with the Meron Dominion, this violation triggered an automatic response. She gestured to the planet below. The species formerly known as the Meron Dominion no longer exists in our physical universe. To be precise, they have been phase-shifted into a parallel dimensional state. They still exist, with full consciousness and community. They experience time and can interact with each other, but they cannot return to this dimension or interact with it in any way. The gathered representatives shifted uncomfortably. The Volari ambassador raised a delicate limb. Were all Meron removed, even those not involved in the incident? Yes, Dr. Kim answered simply. The response is collective and absolute. This was clearly stated in the treaty they signed. Even their children? Asked a representative from the Garian Confederacy, horror evident in its pulsing light patterns. Dr. Kim's expression softened slightly. Meron young were phased with their families and communities intact. They experience no separation or suffering. We are not monsters. An uneasy murmur spread through the gathering. The representative from the powerful Elteri Empire stood, his scaled skin reflecting deep blues of concern. Humanity has kept this capability hidden for centuries, he said. Your ships seemed primitive, your weapons basic. Why reveal such power now? We never wanted to use it, Dr. Kim replied. Humans discovered phase shift technology long before we reached the stars. We also discovered its dangers. Our ancestors chose a different path: conventional technology, gradual development, cooperation when possible. But they preserved the knowledge, just in case. She walked slowly around the room, making eye contact with each representative. When the Meron arrived at Earth, we hoped for true partnership, but we recognized their pattern from our own history. Empires that expand through intimidation eventually commit atrocities. So we included Article 7 as a single clear boundary. The observation deck fell silent as the enormous view-screen activated, showing images of the 7 children who had died on the Odyssey. Their young faces looked out at the gathered representatives, 3 boys and 4 girls, aged 4 to 12. These children will never grow up, Dr. Kim continued, never fall in love, never have children of their own. Their potential was erased because a Maron commander was behind schedule on his mining quotas. Their deaths triggered Article 7. She nodded to her aides, who moved among the representatives, distributing data tablets. Each tablet displayed a treaty document. Earth wishes to establish relations with all your species. These treaties contain standard provisions for trade, cultural exchange, non-aggression, and mutual aid. They also contain Article 7. It is non-negotiable. The Zentepi diplomat studied his tablet nervously. And if we decline, then we have no formal relations, Dr. Kim replied evenly. We force nothing. We conquer nothing. But we protect our children. Absolutely. The representatives looked at each other, at the tablets, at the empty planet below. One by one, they activated the signature fields. Even the powerful Elteri Empire, which had never signed a treaty it did not dictate, added its mark to the document. As the signing concluded, Dr. Kim addressed them once more. The former Maron worlds will be open for settlement by peaceful species seeking new homes. Earth will establish an oversight council to ensure fair distribution. We are not claiming these worlds for ourselves. And the Maron? Asked the Volari ambassador. Will they remain, removed forever? Dr. Kim's expression revealed nothing. That has not been determined. Perhaps after sufficient time for reflection, a process might be considered, but not soon. Some lessons must be thoroughly learned. After the representatives departed, Dr. Kim stood alone at the observation window, looking down at the empty Maron homeworld. Her aide, Shunho, joined her. They're terrified of us now, he said quietly. Fear was not our goal, she replied. Understanding was. And the Maron? Are they truly conscious in the phase shift dimension? Dr. Kim nodded. They exist together, aware of what happened and why. They can build a society there, reflect on their choices, perhaps grow beyond what they were. It's not death. It's consequence. Will they ever return? She turned from the window. That's for future generations to decide. A century from now, perhaps longer, when the memory of those 7 children has been honored by sufficient time. As Harmony Station prepared to depart, news of what had happened spread across the galaxy. The message traveled faster than any ship could fly. Humans had introduced themselves to the galactic community not through conquest or intimidation, but through a simple, absolute boundary. Harm a human child, and your entire species would cease to exist in this universe, not through violence, not through destruction, through removal. It was a power no other species possessed or wanted to test again. In the years that followed, humanity expanded cautiously into space, building relations with other species based on mutual respect and clear boundaries. Article 7 was included in every treaty, but never again activated. The empty Maron worlds were settled by refugees and peaceful species. Earth kept no territory beyond its solar system, seeking cooperation rather than empire. And somewhere beyond normal spacetime, in a parallel dimension they could not leave, the Maron people continued their existence, remembering their lost dominion and the 7 children whose deaths had ended it. The end.